everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you're a new viewer or a returning viewer and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. Don't forget to hit that little bell button or else you're not going to be notified when I upload new content. So this week is part 2 of my Lesbians Ask Me questions. So let's get to them. Brittany asked, was it hard for me to open up about being trans? Yes, it was very, very hard. I don't really know how to answer that except to say it took me 40 years to do it. So you can imagine that it took a lot of soul searching, a lot of introspection, a lot of, is this really what I want to do? Is this really who I am? I don't know if there's anybody else on this planet who thinks more about gender identity and sexual orientation and all the rest than trans people. We look at the issue from a million different directions because we want to know if there's any other way we can be. Now, Bree asks, how should we talk about gender identity? And that's an awesome question because even from allies, I see a kind of way of thinking about it that isn't quite right. And it boils down to this, that, okay, you're a transgender woman. You feel like you're a woman, so you are a woman. So gender identity becomes equated with a feeling. And nobody ever gives much thought to where that feeling comes from. It isn't like I woke up one day and said, I've always been a vanilla fan my entire life. I'm gonna try chocolate. And then I tried chocolate and I thought to myself, I like chocolate better. I'm gonna be a chocolate fan now. And then everybody else said, well, that's all it takes to join the chocolate fan lovers club. All you gotta do is like it. But our identities as men or women come from something else much more deep. It is something that is innate inside of us and it isn't changeable. I always was a woman, and I don't just mean in my heart. A lot of people go, oh, like in your heart, you're a woman. Medical science is actually investigating this, and there's actually more and more studies which point to the fact that the brains of transgender people actually align more with our gender identity than our biological sexes. There are actually parts of my brain which are telling me that you're a woman even though your biological sex is male. Because there are brain gender differences. A lot of people don't realize that men and women don't have the exact same makeup of their brains, the exact same structures. There's differences in white matter distribution and the way the right and left hemispheres are connected. They even think there is something like a gender identity center. So I think as the science advances, we're going to see that gender identity actually has a brain implication. So that's the one thing I wish people really recognize, the fact that it is more than just a feeling. It actually is a medical fact. So Bree had a lot of questions, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And I don't know if I'm going to answer all of them, but one of the other ones is, do you make a point to let people know your orientation, preferred pronouns? And my sexual orientation is lesbian. So yeah, I let people know I'm a lesbian. I mean, how else am I supposed to meet somebody? It can be quite a challenge to meet somebody if you're an average lesbian, let alone a transgender lesbian. Do I let people know my preferred pronouns? Not really, and I've been very fortunate in that regard. When I'm out in the world, pretty much universally, people just call me she and her and ma'am and all the rest, which happens to be my preferred pronoun, so I never really have to correct anybody. And the rare times I have is because those people are being actively transphobic. If it happens online, I don't even bother. I just block and move on, because those are people who are just trying to hurt me on purpose. What affects you the most about the way society views, judges the LGBTQ community? Again, another very broad question, but if I were to break it down to one thing, is that we're not people, that we don't have the same thoughts, ideas, feelings, and motivations that everybody else has. For transgender people in particular, I think too many people outside the community don't even look at us as quite human, that we're somehow perverted monsters, just itching to molest and rape people. And that's even true inside the community. Some of us see us that way. What do you wish people understood about the difference in coming out as gay, bi, lesbian, and coming out as trans? That is a great question. Bree, we need to meet sometimes. We can sit down and have a long conversation about all these questions. There's actually a huge difference to coming out as transgender as opposed to coming out as LGBTQ. The first is that coming out as transgender doesn't mean we can't be any one of the other letters in the rainbow. I actually came out to somebody that way once. I said, so not only am I a lesbian, I'm also another letter in LGBTQ. And he looked at me and he said, bisexual? And I was like, how can I be a lesbian and bisexual at the same time? So one of the big differences is that you can be transgender and a lesbian. You can be transgender, you can be queer. You can be transgender, be bi. You can be transgender and pansexual. You can be transgender and any of the other letters, as I was saying. Because being transgender is not a sexual orientation. It is a gender identity. In the same way that I'm Latina, but that doesn't tell you what race I am. You can be white, Asian, black, and still be Latinx. I feel pretty hip for using that new term. Latinx. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not quite used to using it yet. The second thing that makes us much different is that being transgender is extremely visible. I didn't have to tell my dentist that I came out as lesbian. I didn't have to tell my son's teachers. Didn't have to tell all my relatives, like immediately. But because going through transition is such a visible process, I mean, let's face it, I was gonna look very, very different very, very quickly. I had to let the whole freaking world know. And that was a big pain in the ass. I mean, I'm not kidding. I really did have to tell my dentist. I had to call his office and say, well, you know, the next time I come into the office, I'm gonna be dressed a little differently than the last time. And yeah, I'm gonna have boobs, so no more looking down when you're working on my teeth. The list goes on and on, but it makes us and made me feel incredibly vulnerable. How would you explain the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity? For that, I can actually answer that pretty quickly. There's actually a very well-known phrase that people use for that, which is that sexual orientation is who you want to go to bed with, and gender identity is who you want to go to bed as. It's basically the difference. They're not the same thing. They're not coupled together. I didn't transition from male to female so I could have sex with men. It's actually not about sex at all. It's about our inner identity and how we want to express that to the world. So yeah, I went and got bottom surgery. I got myself a vagina, even though I'm gonna have sex with women. And it's not because I want to put a penis in there, besides like plastic ones and that kind of thing. Here's a pretty serious one. What is the best way to respond when somebody tells me they are transitioning or are transgender? I don't know if there's a best way. I think it depends on the person and your relationship with them. But I will tell you that for me, I wish more people had been concerned about me. Oftentimes when I would tell people that I'm transgender, the first thing they would ask me was, oh wow, how did your wife take it at the time? How did your son take it? How did your family take it? How did your friends take it? And they don't seem to get, and they don't seem to understand that you just told them something amazingly personal and painful about you and your life and your history. And they don't ask you, how do you feel? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? And all of a sudden it turns from something you're doing to help yourself to something you're doing that hurts other people. And then they start talking about how it impacts their lives, and they don't know if they're going to be able to use your chosen name or your pronouns. I've had people straight to my face tell me that they're going to use my old pronouns and my old name. And I just don't get that. I don't know why people would be that callous and that hurtful, but it happens all the time. So show some concern for them. Ask them what pronouns they want you to use. Ask them what name they want you to use. And then do your very best to do those things. Now Amanda asks me, how is it coming out not only as trans, but lesbian as well? How did people respond, and were they more accepting of one than the other? That is very audience specific, but in general, coming out as lesbian was almost a throw-in. To my mom, it was just confusing that I would transition and not be attracted to men. But I think because people are more experienced with sexual orientation, in general, they're more accepting of me being lesbian than being transgender. So if there's one benefit in all this, and it's probably because she doesn't really see me as her daughter, the fact that I bring home a woman to my mom doesn't seem all that unnatural to her. Now Libby from the Orlando Lesbians Facebook group asks me, did the sex you were attracted to change after transition? And I'll reiterate, even though I've been saying it throughout the entire video. I was attracted to women before, and I am still attracted to women. Now as for it being a thing, yeah, you're right. I have had people tell me that their sexual orientation did change. Now why that happens, nobody really understands why. I've had some therapists say that they think that transgender people are the only set of people whose sexual orientation is actually mutable. I've had some therapists say that I so much wanted to become a woman that once I was a woman, my sexual orientation, or at least my true sexual orientation, was now free to express itself. Now for me it didn't change, but I have known some people who've been married to women that after they transitioned now are attracted to men. And it happens in every different combination you can think of. I don't know if anybody is studying why that happens, but it would be a really great question to answer. Jennifer, who's actually one of my friends who helped me gather the questions for this video, thank you so much Jennifer, says, we hear a lot about the inequality of women versus men. Since you were physically both, did you notice a difference? And this is a question that you could ask trans men or trans women. We could tell you about the differences, how men are treated in the workplace and women are treated in the workplace. I'm just going to talk about one thing in there. Yes, there's all kinds of differences, but I'm just going to talk about getting a job. I noticed that when I would interview for folks, their expectations for me were totally different once I transitioned. I used to interview like I did before, and I realized that they didn't want that. They didn't want somebody who was just incredibly competent and could just throw down their credentials and say, hey, I'm going to be great for this job. You should hire me. For me as a woman, they suddenly wanted me to be much more friendly and happy and laughing all the time and smiling. It's like they demanded smiling. Smiling had to be a part of it. People like women who seem like they're going to be agreeable and part of the community and just go along. They want somebody who's warm and nurturing. They don't want somebody who's tough and cold. That is almost seen as not feminine. So yeah, there are differences, big differences. I could probably go on and on and on, but I've already gone on enough. I think 2 videos is more than enough. Thank you to my friends who gathered these questions for me. They're exactly what I wanted. I wanted the real raw truth from people. And on that note, like, share, and subscribe, and see you around the interwebs.